Picture this. You're living tens of thousands of years ago, and survival is basically a brutal math equation. Every single calorie matters. It's the difference between freezing to death or making it to tomorrow. So, why on earth would our ancestors waste precious time and energy on a dead body? You're kneeling beside a campfire. The hand you held yesterday is colder than stone, and the person who just died is right there beside your tools, beside the sleeping kids, right in the middle of everything. There's no hospital curtain to pull, no quiet room where professionals take the body away. For most of human history, death wasn't hidden. It wasn't outsourced. It happened exactly where life happened. Now, the logical, purely survival-brained thing to do would be to just walk away, right? A dead body attracts scavengers. It spreads a smell, draws predators, and turns a safe campsite into a really dangerous place. But that's not what we did. And honestly, this is where human history gets weirdly beautiful. Instead of leaving the dead behind like trash, early humans started doing something completely irrational. They moved them, arranged them, painted them with red pigment, and covered them with things they literally needed to survive. Let me ask you this. If you were an early human carrying a perfectly good hunting spear, would you bury it in the dirt with someone who can never use it again? Let me know what you do in the comments, because giving up a weapon back then was a huge deal. So, why do it? Why spend all that energy on someone who can't hunt, gather, carry, warn, or feed the group anymore? To figure that out, we have to look at the clues they left behind in the dirt. When archaeologists dig up the past, finding a skeleton lying in a random ditch might just be a tragic accident. But when a body is carefully positioned, covered in earth, and surrounded by very specific items, that's not an accident. That's a choice. Take Qafzeh Cave in Israel, for example. About 100,000 years ago, early humans, people with bodies and brains just like ours, were leaving their dead covered in red ocher. Now, ocher is this incredibly vibrant, deep reddish mineral pigment. Think about it functionally. You can't eat it. You can't burn it for warmth. It's literally just pure color. So what does it mean to paint the dead with stark red? Was it meant to look like blood? Did it symbolize life? Or was it just the gentle care of hands refusing to let someone vanish without making a mark? We can't read minds from 100 millennia ago, but we can see the pattern. And it gets even crazier. Over in Shanidar Cave in Iraq, we found the remains of Neanderthals. And look, it's time to throw away that cartoon image of the mindless, brutish caveman. Neanderthals had big brains, made complex tools, and cared for their injured. Back in the 1950s, an archaeologist named Ralph Selecki found a Neanderthal skeleton surrounded by clumps of pollen. He famously suggested that they were deliberately buried with flowers. Now, scientists still argue about this. Some say, hey, maybe burrowing animals just track the pollen down there. But the fact that we're even debating whether a totally different species of human held flower funerals is mind-blowing. But if you really want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, fast forward to a site called Sunghir in Russia, about 30,000 years ago. We are talking about the Pleistocene epoch, the Ice Age. The world is freezing, and surviving a single day takes immense effort. Here, archaeologists found 2 children buried with long spears and literally thousands of tiny hand-carved beads. And these weren't just any beads. They were made from woolly mammoth ivory. Let's stop and think about the brutal math of that for a second. A woolly mammoth was a massive, dangerous megafauna. Just getting the ivory was a high-stakes mission. Then, someone had to sit down in the freezing cold and carve each individual bead out of rock-hard ivory using nothing but crude stone tools. Carving just one bead takes hours. They made thousands. That is time not spent hunting meat, not gathering berries, not chopping firewood. It was a massive, almost reckless sacrifice of survival resources. So why? Why give all that unimaginable wealth, all those calories and hours of labor to a child who can't even wake up to wear it tomorrow? Because ancient humans weren't just stomachs with legs. They lived in complex social webs. So put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're in a small band of hunter-gatherers, constantly moving to survive. One morning, you wake up and the camp is just quiet in the wrong way. An elder has died in the night. You don't call for help. You just wrap the body in a hide. A couple of you carry them away. Not too far, but just far enough so the living space can breathe again. Someone brings a shell full of that red ocher. Another person grabs a stone tool the elder used every day, because honestly, leaving it behind just feels wrong. Is that tool going to be useful to a dead person? Obviously not. But is it useful to the living? Somehow, yes. You scrape a shallow pit into the earth with your bare hands and stone tools. It's awkward, exhausting work, mostly because grief just makes everything feel heavy in a completely different way. You lay them down, maybe curl their knees up like they're sleeping. You brush the red pigment over them, pile up some stones to keep the scavengers away, and then you leave. Because out there, hunger doesn't hit pause just because you're sad. But here's the crazy part. Life continues, but the landscape has completely changed. That cave you left them in? It's no longer just a cave. That hill isn't just a random hill anymore. Every time your group passes by that patch of dirt, memory rises right out of the earth. And just like that, you created one of the oldest forms of human belonging. And this brings us to the biggest plot twist. Burial probably didn't even start as a religious belief about the afterlife. It started as a technology for the living. Think about it. When a skilled tracker or a grandmother dies in a small tribe, it's not just a private tragedy. It literally shatters the group. You lose hunting routes, plant knowledge, and childcare. How does a tiny group survive that kind of emotional and practical hit over and over again? They survive by making grief shared. When our ancestors gathered around a body, they were proving to each other that no one disappears alone. They were giving the living something to do when there was nothing left to fix. But here is where things get really messed up. In science, there's a concept called evolutionary mismatch. It essentially means our brains evolved to survive in one type of world, but we are forcing them to live in a completely different one. For millions of years, your brain was hardwired to process loss slowly, out in the open, surrounded by your tribe. But modern life? It gets this totally backwards. Today, death happens behind closed doors. Professionals handle the bodies, and you're given a neat little schedule, a quick 2-day bereavement leave, and an expected return-to-work date. Society expects you to just bounce back. But your brain? Your brain has no idea what a corporate office or a return-to-work policy is. It is still a hunter-gatherer brain. It still looks for the missing person in the crowd. It still attaches heavy emotional anchors to an old watch, a ring, a shirt, or a specific song. When you hold on to those things, you aren't being irrational. You're doing exactly what your ancestors did 100,000 years ago. You're turning absence into something your mind can physically hold. That's why ancient humans spent so much energy on the dead. Not because they had extra time, but because the dead still had immense power over the living. Our ancestors didn't have marble headstones. They didn't have printed photographs or hospital records. But they had hands, red pigment, stones, and this unbearable need to say that a life didn't just stop, it touched other lives. So, you kneel beside a body that does not answer. And somehow, across tens of thousands of years, it still answers you.